Okay, so uh, this is kind of just, we're going to continue talking about what we've talked about in the last two sessions. And we talked about values, we talked about self-compassion. So we're going to get a little bit more into that self-compassion and how it relates to New Year's resolutions and how to best do that. So we'll have that self-compassionate reflection check-in, and then we'll reflect on current habits and resolutions, and then self-care work and homework. And then again, we have 4 more weeks. So we'll explore the question, what does living my best life mean? So that includes today. Okay, so we talked about self-compassion last time. It's simply compassion directed inwards to ourselves. We know that's not the easiest thing to do. And the best way to do that is to really reflect on it and how compassionate we are to others, and then eventually bring that compassion toward ourselves. So it takes a lot of practice, just like resiliency work, mindfulness training, breathing can take some work. So our objectives is to really understand that self-compassion, maybe even understand that score if you were able to take the self-compassion test, and what to do next, and then how to be more compassionate to ourselves, and then practice that, of course. So so let's just kind of talk about that for a moment. Has that self-compassion been easy for you? Were you able to take that assessment? Go ahead, if anyone wants to share.
I took the assessment. I'm going to look up my sticky note that I copied.
Okay.
So I scored overall score of 2.73.
Okay.
And there were some areas that were higher.
Sure.
Or, well, I guess I don't know if you want it higher or low. It depends on which thing it was.
Right. That's true.
Some of them you want higher or lower. The common humanity, I scored 3.5, and that's, you want that to be higher.
Yeah.
And as I was filling out the questionnaire, I kind of saw that. I could tell, because it's easy for me to think about like other people are going through this too, or like my issues are no harder, no easier than other people's issues. Like I think that when I compare myself to others, I have a good perspective, but then I scored low on mindfulness, and that totally does not surprise me either. So just kind of some good areas, and then some areas that could be improved.
Great. It's all about that awareness, and you just being able to point that out and say, that this is where I scored higher, this is where I scored lower, and I can see I can improve on some areas. That's key. So good job. Good. How about you, Mona?
Okay, so I'm looking at, I took a picture of it, and so it says, thank you for completing the Moral Foundation survey. Is that what I was supposed to take?
I don't think so. Did you get a different link?
Yeah, I clicked on that link, and so I'm like, I didn't get mindfulness.
Oh.
I didn't get into that.
Oh, yeah, because it once you click the link, it went right to the assessment, the test.
And so it's based on your responses, your Moral Foundation's profile is the following. So I have a Morals Foundation profile.
That?
Yeah.
So I can't really respond to your question because I don't know how I got this.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Yeah. So did it say that you had high morals, or?
Well, I'm really high in care and fairness.
Oh, I believe that. Yes.
So
interesting. Well, that sounds like a good assessment too. But no, that probably is more related to others than yourself, or like self-compassion. So I'll have to resend that assessment to you.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I was talking to my husband this weekend about, I think I'm more aware of self-care and the importance of it. Sometimes I think we look at it as a luxury instead of a necessity. And so we had that conversation this weekend about, because we both went for a massage on Saturday to different places. And he's like, Yeah, that's just one of those little nice things to do for yourself. That's just a luxury. And I'm like, no, it's really not a luxury. It's something that you really need to do for self-care. Just part of
Yeah,
health maintenance.
yeah,
Mhm.
that's so true. But it's also a good time to even, if it can be really hard work, but even for him to really explore why he is saying that it's a luxury and not something to do, because in that exploration of that statement um, is very transformative, which we'll talk about. And is
Mhm.
that kind of a learned response? Has he been told that self-care doesn't matter, or just it's kind of it's that's where the kind of that healing is. And when you can really explore that moment, uh, you can really learn a lot about yourself. And that's where that awareness comes from. And then you can um, continue on, or you can make some small little changes. And does that mean eventually he would be doing more self-care? Or so we never know. We never know. Everyone is really different. So like you just mentioned, is self-care, is self-compassion easy, or is it hard? Uh, and, and in some things, you can pick out things really fast of what you're compassionate about on this topic or this topic, but not so compassionate on other topics. So it's good to have that awareness of both, like what's easy and what's hard. And then you can make some small changes. So we really want to tie those into your goals and your resolution, because eventually, as the weeks go on, we'll really be delving into those resolutions and those goals that you have set for yourself, to say, why did I set this for myself? Is it something I really want? Is it linking back to my values? Is it linking back to being self-compassionate about myself? Or is it about changing something about myself that I hate so much? And I'm the goal that I've set for myself continues on that self-hatred, or that critical statement that you said about yourself, in not a very positive way. And oftentimes we'll do that more as a punishment. We'll set these goals more as a punishment for ourselves, without really um, having that awareness, or thinking about why we're doing it, and how we're doing it. And then oftentimes um, we won't accomplish that goal. And then there's another thing that we can be self-critical about. Oh, I failed at that. I failed at that. So our ultimate goal is to come into our goals with our values and being very self-compassionate about it, so that that way we'll be able to achieve our goals uh, that are right for us. So we'll be talking a lot more about that over today and the next 3 weeks. So getting back into that self-compassion scoring, Mona, is this the link that you clicked on, that test how self-compassionate you are, and it brought you to the morals?
Yeah, I don't know I just clicked on the link and just did the
Yeah.
survey. So I'm not
Okay.
sure what I did wrong, but I'll try it again.
Yeah, and I'll look at it too and figure it out. So like Ashley had mentioned, it was kind of like they look at an average, so an overall average self-compassion score of 3.0 on a 1 through 5 scale is what we're looking at. And then as a rough guide for your overall self-compassion score, a 1 to a 2.5, you are low in self-compassion, and then a 2.5 to 3.5, you're moderate, and then a 3.5 to 5 means that you have high self-compassion. And then what's really nice about that website is once you go into it, you can kind of see where you fall. And then there's a link for a variety of other self-compassion activities that you can do to increase your self-compassion. So I really like Kristen Neff and her group of educators and therapists. They do a lot of really good work in that self-compassion realm to, and it's, you know, some activities are very, very short, but it can be really, really hard work depending on, you know, our what our beliefs are around that, and our own critical statement and how deep we delve into it. And so that is always a good thing to start at. And even going in, and when you're taking the assessment, I copied some of the questions down. So the first question is, I'm approving and judgmental about my own flaws and inadequacies. So that was the first one. And so, you know, I answered them all almost always, not for myself, just for the sake of this. But you know, you're kind of going through, it's like, oh, you know, there's what, 25 questions or whatever. Oftentimes we just go through and we just kind of click and da 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 da. But sometimes it's really good to really reflect on the question itself or the statement itself. And then, you know, if I disapprove and I'm really judgmental about my own flaws and inadequacies, and I said almost always, really reflecting on that, you know, asking yourself a lot of questions around that, which we'll get into, and you know, bringing that up to the surface and catching yourself when you are being judgmental, because there is a lot of there can be a lot of aha moments in why you do what you do. And then when we kind of figure out and ask ourselves some questions around that, then that's kind of where that healing comes in. So when I'm feeling down, I tend to obsess and fixate on everything that's wrong in my life. And, you know, that's another one where, you know, one thing might go wrong, or depending on how I'm feeling in that moment. And oftentimes in mindfulness training, we teach a lot of, you know, settling in and being in this moment, being in this experience, and sitting with it, no matter what, if you're happy, if you're sad, if, you know, whatever feeling that is. And then just noticing how that feels in the body, where you're feeling it in the body, and then noticing that it's kind of like a wave. It comes and goes. So the more that we do the mindfulness training, the more that we kind of sit in that moment, we can feel the change in ourselves. Everything is in a constant change. We are always changing. Nothing is static. Nothing ever stays the same. We're different than we were yesterday. We're different than we were a second ago. This next breath we take is new. We've never taken this breath before. And so when we look at change, sometimes change can be really, really scary, but nothing is staying the same. So everything is constantly changing. And oftentimes we look at not wanting change because we want that security of sameness, and we feel comfortable in that. But when we kind of can bring to the forefront that everything around us is constantly changing, then we can be more self-compassionate for ourselves. Because kind of even thinking about, I remember when we got the electronic medical record at the hospital. I was working cardiac rehab at the time, and everything we did was paper form. So here, this patient came in, cardiac rehab patient. We had this clipboard, and I could quickly just look at last session's notes, read them, and then just start writing on how they did on that day and go and talk to them. And then this epic showed up, this electronic medical record showed up, and it felt like I was, you know, you had to bring this computer over and sit with them. And, you know, while I was writing, I could write and look them in the eye at the same time. But with this epic, I was looking at this computer, and it was such a change. It was such a change that, and I remember so many people were so upset with it. And so eventually I was able to, you know, type and look them in the eye. You know, it took a little while, but you know, you end up making these small little tweaks to really make whatever change happens works. And you can kind of look at the same thing as, I'm an old lady, and my kids have grown up with technology, and everything is very easy for them. And when I have to learn a new thing, I'll have to ask them, oh, I need to learn this. And so I'll ask them to to show me something. And then all of a sudden I'm doing it just naturally. And it was a learned thing that I have just learned over the last couple of weeks. And it was like it had never, like I've known how to do it all the time. And so when we kind of look back at those things that we've learned in the past that we knew nothing about, but now it becomes a habit, and now we know, we can look at that into our future as well and say, well, I can learn, I can do this, I can learn new things, and that change, even though it was hard, now now I got it. Now I can do this with ease. And so when we sit in those moments, those mindful moments, and we sit in the sadness, or we sit in that feeling, we notice that feelings come and go, sensations come and go, and and that's a good thing. So even though we're sad in this moment, or even though we have pain in this moment, we can feel that ebb and flow and the ever changing feeling of that. So it takes some practice, and it's really hard work. So if you want to, you can go back and take this assessment anytime you want. But when you do go back, you know maybe not even go through the whole assessment, maybe take one or two of them, and kind of reflect on the ins and outs, and I'll explain that in just a moment. Okay, so we talked about that self-criticism last time. I had you write down your most critical statement that you said about yourself. And uh, so let's explore that critical statement today. Like, what is it? Just look at it, explore it, experience it. Do you remember what you had written down or what you said? Or do you still have that by you? Yeah, okay. So when you say that to yourself, where do you feel it? Where do you feel it in the body? How does it relate um, to your experience? I know when I say my most critical statement, I feel it right in my diaphragm, spleen, liver area. And I just feel it with such heaviness. And so just allowing yourself to feel where you feel it, and you can even put your hand right over that space, with a lot of tenderness, and just sit in that moment, just feel what you're feeling, and then just really show up to that experience with a lot of courage and kindness. It's really, really hard work. And then uh, just really delve into that statement. Is this statement true? Whatever that is it true? What about it is true? You wouldn't be saying it or feeling it if if there's something about it that you won't keep grasping onto. So kind of, where did you hear it? When did you start saying that? In what experiences, or in what activities, or in what moments of your life does that come to the surface? Is it when you make a mistake? Is it, fill in the blank? So what about that in that moment is true? And is it true? What about it in that moment is false? And I know last time somebody had mentioned one of their critical statements is, I can't do it. I can't do it. Um, when something new comes in, or when I want to make a goal for myself, I'll say, I can't do it. I can't. So what about that is true? What about that is false? So you're really looking at really feeling it and being in that experience with it, to find the truth and know that your truth is greater than your suffering. So when we can kind of call it out and say, what, that's not true. I can definitely do these things, and I can work hard. And in the past, I had this really hard situation that happened, and I got myself through it. How did I get myself through that? Well, I did what I needed to do, and you can always trace that moment back to, what value did that connect with, that you were able to finish it. And so it's always good to kind of explore the past a little bit when you were successful and what you did to find that truth around your next activity or your next goal, when that critical statement comes in. And just know that your truth is greater than your suffering. And our ultimate goal is to get to that point where New Year's resolutions are based on the truth of who you are as a person, back to your values, and being very self-compassionate about that. And then we mentioned this before, we're looking for progress. Nobody's perfect. Nobody ever has been perfect. And really not only knowing that, you're getting better, you're learning. And as long as you kind of take that moment and stop and sit in that experience, sit in that feeling, and really pull out what you need to find that truth, and to be your own student and teacher of yourself, then you'll find that wisdom within you to be able to live your best life and move forward with that. So, and that hail to just aspire to do the best you can. And I think Brene Brown said it best when she just sat in that moment of, doing the best that she could. She realized that everyone else is doing the best that they can too. And then in that moment, that judgment of ourselves and that critical statement can really be either banished or softened, because we are doing the best that we can. And so is everyone else. So that self-kindness really comes in first. So looking at your current habits, whatever you're doing in life, just being very warm and understanding toward yourself. And, when we suffer, when we fail, when we feel inadequate, rather than being self-critical. And it's okay to be critical of yourself, but we need to need to really look at that criticism and pull out the truth. And then how to be very kind to ourselves in that moment, because everyone makes mistakes. And then we really want to soothe and nurture ourselves when confronting our pain, because when we sit in that sadness or that feeling, we're going to feel pain with life. So, and that is part of being a human. And so we want to acknowledge our problems and shortcomings and do so without the judgment. But we also want to notice when we are judging. Then when we do that, then we can help ourselves. And then last time we did talk about this mindfulness, the mindful thoughts. Notice the thoughts. Oftentimes we do this so subconsciously, we will say this critical statement to ourselves, but now we really want to notice when you're doing this, and just notice it and bring out that truth. And then the most important thing with this is turning towards that pain, the thoughts, that emotions, seeing them as they are, and recognizing what we're feeling, acknowledging the pain, where we feel it in the body. And then, like I said, putting your hand over that, wherever you're feeling that critical statement or that pain or that feeling. And then, bringing that hand over very tenderly, and then bringing yourself some common humanity and some kindness by saying, ouch, this really hurts, naming that feeling, being in that moment, and then what you need, really getting that self-care. And then remembering that stress reaction that we talked about is fundamentally good, and it is your body's way of telling you something. And so this is where that self-compassion work really comes into play. Learning where, why, how our feelings, that critical statement, fill in the blank, are impacting the actions that we do. So our ultimate goal is to become more responsive and not reactive. So we're responding to that pain with self-kindness. We're not reacting to it, like pushing it away or not doing anything about it. We're so used to getting over it or moving on and not dealing with it. And so it is counterintuitive to just sit in it, to just sit in that pain and think about it and be in that moment and say, oh, you know, this is coming from this, and it's not suiting me to be in this moment anymore. So how can I draw from that wisdom, and how can I heal from being in that moment? And so oftentimes what will happen when we sit in the pain, and when we feel it, and when we take care of ourselves in that moment, we'll get that wisdom, and that can lead us into that goal setting, those New Year's resolutions for ourselves in the best way, for healing, for meaning, and then, you know, oftentimes what will happen is we'll stick with those New Year's resolutions. They're not going to just be something that we're really struggling to do for the next 6 weeks and then forget it. I'm back to not doing anything, or back to my old habits that aren't that are more of a negative habit than a positive one. So that's where those New Year's resolutions come in. So inner wisdom can be experienced by being mindful of our thoughts, values, feelings, and our words that we're saying when we actually sit in it and kind of figure out the ins and outs and the whys and the hows and where this come from. That can be really tough work, to the point where maybe we can't do it on our own. Maybe we can't be our own teacher and student. Maybe we need to talk it through with somebody, and that's okay. It's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to you know, talk to a counselor, a therapist, or to really work yourself through it, or talking to a friend. And so we can access this wisdom to be on our own personal wellness journey, being aware of what works the best for us through what we're finding out about that pain and about those habits. And then that self-compassion really leads us to healthier choices, because we're learning from that wisdom that we're learning from our pain. And then that leads us into really living our best life. And so eventually, it's not really about making these big, robust goals. It's about, you know, sitting with what's next, what do I need next, and and then taking those steps to making those things happen. And yeah, making those goals and resolutions to really work on making those habits to be something that we just do, because they're the best. They're the best choices for us, and then we know that. So I know sometimes that can be very vague, but it's so personal work that that we just really need to have time to reflect on that before, you know, and hopefully you can give me some examples next time on how this is working for you, and what those aha moments are, and what you're kind of taking away, and what you're sitting with, and when you're sitting with something, what you're grabbing onto, so that it leads you into making the best possible goal or step that really reaches into your self-compassion and your value. So any questions?
A lot to take in, Stacy.
It is. It's really hard work.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, not a question, but a comment, and just feeling like the eye-opening realization or insight that you shared about how your resolutions, well, we often align them with our criticism, our self-criticism, and that's not the healthy or the right way to do it. And so, for me, it will be a self-reflection thought on how I can properly align my resolutions to my values and my needs. And so that's a really insightful thing that I hope I will give the time to, because I am low on that mindfulness area, as I mentioned. So to be able to spend the time to think about it is where I will need to also consider. So
Yeah, yep, that is very good awareness too, as it relates to what, what do I allow myself time for, and when can you kind of carve out that time to think about it, and it's kind of scary, like, oh, I'm going to be carving out some time and thinking about this. What is going to come up to the surface, and is it going to be okay? And and so, just know that it can be really, really hard, and that's okay. That's okay. When we bring this up and when we start really delving into it, it can lead you somewhere better.
Mhm.
All right. Well, good job. Good job thinking about things and just being in the moment. And as it relates to homework for next week, it is just really thinking about your current habits, any goals that you've set for yourself, and just like Ashley said, what is a connection to are your goals and habits uh, being very compassionate toward yourself, or are you linking them to your critical statement? And how can you kind of tweak that a little bit to make them more soothing, more tender, more caring? Okay.
Thanks, Stacy.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. You are welcome. We will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.